Hey, welcome. I'm Ron Brooks with Truett's Grill, and we are delighted to welcome you to today's session in our employability seminar. It's a series of 7 sessions where we're discussing things that are going to make you more attractive to the employers or the future promoters that you plan to impress. And we're going to get you through something very, very important today. We're talking about our use of technology. Melissa, this one is a bit of a bear, but I think it's one of the most attractive topics for people who want a job or want promotions today. What do you think?
Yeah, well, it's necessary. It's not one of those things anymore that it's a perk if you have some skills. It's necessary. You can't even apply for a job now without some skills. So, yeah, definitely a necessary topic.
Literally, you can't apply. That's exactly right. We're one of the few places that still use some pen and ink around here, but for the most part, you really do need some technological savvy just to literally begin the process and then to be able to demonstrate your capabilities to manage or carry out the job. For anything other than entry level, and for many places entry level work, this is going to be necessary. Putting your best foot forward means being able to demonstrate a proficiency. So I'm excited about this topic. Of course, I'm joined today by Melissa Gordon, who's the Assistant Director of Academic Affairs at UGA Griffin. And we have a couple of very special guests with us. Melissa, why don't you tell us about our guests, and then we're going to dive right into the topic.
I will. I know these 2 guests, and I'm a little nervous. I'm gonna be honest. I'm a little nervous this week because these 2 guests are work here at the University of Georgia Griffin campus. They are our IT guys. And even today, I've had one of them ask me, "Did you restart your computer?" So I know that my often response to my issues is, "Did you restart your computer?" So that's kind of when I see them, I'm like, that's what they're going to ask me. But we're honored that they were both able to take some time out of their day today. Obviously, everybody who's on it, this isn't your first session. You recognize Lee Taylor. Lee's been on every one, and so Lee's the star this time. So I'm just going to turn it over to Lee. But we're very excited that Lee's with us. Lee started off as a student here at the University of Georgia Griffin campus. He completed one of our bachelor's degrees, our BBA in general business. We won't say when.
That's right.
Okay.
We're just not going to talk about ages.
Anyway, yeah. So a little while ago, and he was a student worker here. He stayed on as an employee, and now the official title, you're the IT manager for academic programs. Did I get that correctly? Yeah.
That is correct.
Yay! So we're honored to have Lee with us, and we're also joined with Doug Stewart, whose official title is IT senior manager for College of Agricultural and Environmental Sciences. Doug, I took that off of the directory. Yes.
Very good. Very good.
I threatened to ad lib some more for both of them, but I'm not, because sometimes I need my computer to work. So I'm very excited, and we are honored that both of you were able to join us today. So thank you.
Thank you. And if you think Lee's been gone, it was out of school for a while, we won't even talk about how long I've been out of school.
I was going to be nice, Doug. I was going to be nice.
Fantastic. This promises to be just a chock full session that's going to get us started. So Lee, let me start with you. Why don't you give us sort of your take on technology and the use of technology as people are stepping into the workforce and intending to step up their capabilities to be ready, to be job ready.
Sure. So I think it's no secret that technology is something that is ever evolving and is becoming a more and more common thing in the workplace. I mean, it's just part of pretty much any job you're going to have hands-on with technology. And when it comes to applying for jobs or anything like that, or even just your first initial thing into going to the workplace is your email stuff. So I mean, email is kind of step one of entering the workforce. I mean, you're not going to apply for a job where you're not likely to be communicated with an email. And your email etiquette is something that's preached about a lot, but being cognizant of your email address that you're using. I actually had this conversation with Doug the other day about some of the people who on campus here even who use an email address, and you're kind of like, that's a really interesting choice for a professional email. Email addresses are free. Go to Gmail or wherever and just create you an account with a username that is something other than wildboy7222. Something random like that. You do something professional in your name, something that identifies you as you professionally. And the second part of that is communication and being mindful of how you're communicating with people. It's not a text message with your friends, so you can't just go out and drop LOLs and smiley faces everywhere. It's a professional environment, so communicate as you would with your manager in person. And then another thing I was thinking about when we were discussing this is, and there's been a little bit of overlap with some things we discussed last week too. So we kind of got in a little bit with Zoom. With today's age and just how things have gone over the past year, it's really likely that you will be doing an interview or something through Zoom like this. Whether it's Zoom, Skype, or many of the others, pretty much all of those are free. You can go and download ahead of time to familiar yourself with these technologies. So that way you're not scrambling to try to figure out how to get into a meeting. One of the things that's really important is removing distractions from your area. So, pets, kids running around, if you're able to do that, there's noises all around that are distracting. So if someone's bouncing a basketball behind you like this, it can be a little distracting. And then your background's important too. So behind me right now is all of this cluttered mess of an office. Virtual backgrounds are your friend. If you can't, Melissa, I'm not going to say anything. So if you can't get to somewhere where there's just a clean, just a blank wall behind you, use a virtual background that's built into this. I usually go with our UGA, something like that, but you can get, probably not the best idea to go create, too creative and get flames everywhere. So go professional on that if you can, or just find a space behind you that's not distracting. The focus should be on you. So another thing to be mindful of is your lighting. Lighting is really important because you need to be lit up. This is me without lighting. So not the prettiest thing. And then if I turn this, just, light yourself up, be mindful of, what's around you. And then another thing that's important is, if possible, invest in a webcam. Some computers, webcams are just kind of terrible, but if, right now it might be hard to get your hands onto one because everybody's bought them up from COVID, but a webcam that makes yourself look better to those that are going to be interviewing you is always a good thing. Another thing is earbuds like these. Cuts down on feedback or anything like that, and just any issues you might have where sound's coming out of your speakers and going back in your microphone, just not the best thing. Another aspect that I was actually going to lean over to Doug on is security. Security in the workplace is something that's really important. We've all heard about leaks from any number of people, and there's ways around that when you first get into the workplace. And I'll let kind of him talk about that some.
All right, well, thanks for throwing that over, Lee. Because going back to your email, that is the number one way that companies have to deal with what they call a business email compromise, or a BEC, because you get that email saying whatever. It might be a potential employer supposedly sending you a link to check into their personnel system. Well, if you posted on social media that, hey, you just got an offer from so-and-so, you may have just told the world that I'm primed to be phished for an email. So be very careful when you get that email. Make sure it is from who you say it is. And just because the address says Melissa Gordon doesn't necessarily mean it came from Melissa Gordon. A simple way is, if you're on a computer, hover your mouse over that. It'll usually tell you the email address hidden behind it. And if it's wildboy777, it's not Melissa Gordon at uga.edu. So pay attention to that. And then, once you get that job, always be mindful of emails. I can tell you story after story. I get links almost daily about businesses that have been compromised. And the mindset a lot of people have is, my job's not that important. Why do I care? And that's because the bad guys know your job's not that important. That means you're easier to crack. And once they get their foot in the door, they will start looking for ways to help out. So you want to make sure on the security side, with the email, with texting, there's a lot of SMS texting, or the SMS phishing or smishing is when you get a bogus email text, maybe from your bank or a personnel manager, and the first thing it does is says, give me all your contact information, and potentially you've had your identity stolen, or if once you get to work for a company, you've just given them access to stuff they don't need access to. So be very suspicious of those emails that are coming in if you're looking for a job, especially if you're posting stuff on social media, because there are trolls out there that are looking for that type of stuff, and they will take advantage of you in a heartbeat.
Another thing that Doug mentioned the other day that I thought was really interesting is how many attacks come to UGA that day that they're fighting against?
Yeah, I had a meeting not too long ago with our information security guys, and apparently the University of Georgia deals with, on average, 3 million attacks a day. So that's a lot of attacks, and they're from all over the world. They're not necessarily just from the U.S., and they're not just from, China or Russia, though we have lots of overseas attacks that come in apparently as well. But it's a big business. The bad guys are out there learning new ways to convince you to give up the information they're looking for on a daily basis. And all the emails that used to show up, the grammar was horrible, the English was horrible, it was misspelled. Those days are pretty much gone. I have seen some very, very convincing emails, and all I would say is be very keep your eyes open and your ears, paying attention. Something doesn't seem quite right. You can always pick up the telephone and call the person who supposedly sent it to you and say, hey, I just got an email. I just want to make sure you sent that to me, because that beats, typing in the wrong information and sending $800,000 to a company that you shouldn't have sent money to, which you wouldn't have. But if you're working for somebody, I can tell you, I could give you more details of that, where that happened. And just because somebody didn't pick up the telephone and confirm that something that didn't quite seem right, they didn't check it. So even if you're looking for a job and something doesn't look right, a lot of them are going to look fine. So you don't have to call for every one of them. Let's not make the personnel manager think that you can't think on your own. But if something doesn't look quite right, be safe, not sorry, and reach out just to make sure that that person find a different way. And don't reply to the email going, did you send this? The bad guy reply back and go, yep, I sure did. And I've seen that happen as well too.
I think it's interesting that this particular topic's coming up because, several times we've talked, Ron, about being a good employee means making sure that you're not costing your employer money, and that you're not causing your employer undue stress. And this is certainly one of those ways, being very mindful of these smishing, or I'm not good with the vocabulary. Did I say it right? Smishing? Okay. And phishing. Yeah.
And there's actually something called vishing, which is a voice, it's artificial voice calls. So, yep. Phishing, smishing, and vishing are all honest to goodness ways that people will try to convince you to do something that if they were honest about it, you would not do.
Another thing that came up, Ron, if you don't mind, the whole thing with Lee mentioning the emails, and Doug echoed it too, being very careful with how you have as many email addresses as you want, but when it comes to actually applying for the job or communicating with HR, when it's, especially in the hiring process, create at least one professional sounding email. So, I mentioned before, sometimes when you're, and in my previous career, very often we would have so many applications to go through that there had to be some sort of pre-vetting. And, one of those things is, how professional is this person on a piece of paper or on a screen? And that email address could cause you to not be at the top of the list because you've already created that first impression, and not in a good way. So that's thank you for sharing that Lee, and hopefully we've got some people changing some email addresses right now.
You're right. That was brilliant. And you may have been the same way. I'm way down the road thinking about things like, the essential platforms that we, need to be savvy with, software, hardware. And here we are starting with email. What an amazing, which is why we want the experts to make sure we're not missing a single thing. And yes, we start out with solid gold. That was fabulous. So thanks for that. Those things are genius. And I've started thinking back through, okay, I think I've had a couple of smishes earlier this week. So I'm going to have to go back and look out for those. I wonder what those long strings of odd text are. Apparently that's what it is, right, gentlemen? Yeah, somebody's trying to get me on the hook. They're just wishing I would do their smishing, and I'm not going to do it. Like Dr. Seuss, right? So listen, so we talk about some of those early things. And of course, next week, I'm giving a plug here. We're talking about professionalism. And so that really is going to lead into that. But thank you, because as a technological aspect, we might not have even discussed. So we want to make sure I heard several things. I heard making sure our email address is something that, that we want our employer to be happy to use and to think highly of us. We want to make sure that we're not creating a problem for our current employer, who could be our promoter if we do very well, and not if we don't. We want to make sure that as you said, we're adding value. We've heard that same thing, and not creating expense. And so we're talking about a number of these things. Take us into the realm, and I can think of a couple of different ways you can talk about this with your particular expertise, in the realm of things that that either it would be so much more helpful. And I'd like to talk about software and hardware, if those are even the most apropos terms, that you see that is essential for people to use as they're approaching being ready for the workplace, both software and hardware, they need to be aware of and can have a competency with. And maybe some things that you hear people asking questions about that you think, you know what, by now you probably ought to know that. And so take it away, because regale us with your stories if you want, because sometimes that's the best way to learn. But from either direction, can you help us with both software and hardware, and take it as you please?
Lee, you want to start?
Sure. So I think hardware-wise, the vast majority of places are PC or Windows based. So just understanding basic use of Windows computers. Some people are Mac people by nature. So if you are an Apple person and you're familiar with that, if you can function one well enough, then you can probably do the other. So from a hardware side, just basic computer skills. Software, the first thing that comes to mind is just Microsoft Office. It's kind of the standard for anything to do with business, because it's Microsoft Word, Excel, Outlook. So it's your email, word processing, and your spreadsheets through Excel and all. So those are the first software things that come to mind. Another thing that I wrote down earlier that I was kind of thinking about is, when it comes to software, is kind of think ahead to where you want your career to go. So if you wanted to do things that are more marketing focused or design, look up and develop some skills with Photoshop, or if you're going to do web design, HTML coding, just things like that. If you're going to be doing things with maybe like an analyst, consider looking at databases and how those work. So from the software side, I would say kind of picture where you want to take yourself. But on a base level, I would say that Office is definitely step one for anyone stepping into the professional world.
I would agree with that. And what we're seeing as well in the academic world is G Suite, or the Google suite of products, is starting to come in. The University of Georgia has recently added G Suite for our faculty and staff, because a lot of high schools are using G Suite. I get why they do, and I think eventually that will probably bleed into the commercial or professional market where folks are working. But if all you know right now is Google Docs and Google Sheets and the Google products, you might want to do a little bit of checking into Word and Excel, because that's probably what you're going to find in the business market right now. But again, kind of another thing that Lee talked about with the hardware, you will find certain industries, they're Mac folks. You're going to find certain industries, they're Windows folks. Walking in the door going, I don't know how to use Windows, I'm a Mac person, at a Windows shop is not going to help you get a job. And vice versa. Walking into a Mac shop and going, all I know how to use is Windows, not going to help you. So doing a little bit of research, you can probably figure out what more likely those industries are looking towards. As Lee said, a lot of technology does both Mac and Windows. A lot of design companies, and I'm going to use the term creative companies, tend to use a lot more Macs, but companies that are strictly business in a commercial sense, you're going to find a lot more Windows products there. But with regards to if you're using one or the other, hopefully you can adapt to that. But Windows and Mac, for me, I don't usually argue with folks on that one, because that's kind of like politics or religion. You know what you like. Yeah, I'm not going to convince you, and I'm not even going to try. So If you are very set in your way as to which way you want to work, and that's what you're familiar with, see if you can't find a company that's already using that, and that'll help you get in the door better too, I think.
Very good, very good. Let me pull from some of my some of the things that are part of our operation here, and you can tell me how broadly these are going to be applicable, and pick which ones that are, because I go way back in terms of the things that I'm used to using. But I will tell you some things that I know that we have to train people on, and this is with almost any position. If you ever want to see any progress, you're going to eventually have to know these. I'll have to educate people on some of the teams that I lead, for example, with Bluetooth technology, because we use a number of things that are Bluetooth connected. I have to educate on different types of USB connectors, because we have hardware that has USB-C, USB minis. We cover the gamut with USB. We have a few applications that will use HDMI cables. So tell me even things like that, because I know that may seem granular, and I'm not sure the best way to go at it, but you two have this expertise. And I know that if somebody comes and they're on one of the teams that I lead here, and I just have to mention something, and I don't even have to explain it, because they have enough familiarity, they have a basic core competency with things, that shoots them ahead in terms of what I think they're ready for next. And all of my counterparts were the same way. So what are some of these, if you get into some of the granular things and think through your steps, what are some things that you can say, if you will learn these 3 things or these 5 things about the hardware you're using, or the components you're using, or the technology you're using, it'll put you ahead of the pack? Because that's really what this is designed to do. It's designed to help people get ahead of the pack and say, everybody else is good, but I'm better than good. And we really want people to think about that. So take off with that, if you don't mind, and help us learn some things about some of these just basics of hardware that you probably take for granted, and that we sometimes scratch our heads over.
I can start with that one. And I won't say we take it for granted. We have to work with people like Melissa all the time to help them fix problems.
Oh, that was a softball pitch. I didn't know I was doing it.
Anyhow, but I will say the one technology you mentioned, USB. The other term that goes with USB is plug and play, but the term that most technology people refer to it as plug and pray, because you plug it in and you hope it works, because if it doesn't work, there's not a lot of troubleshooting. Talking about a network cable, give me an Ethernet cable. I can troubleshoot that all day long. I can check the connectors. I can run all kinds of diagnostics, and everything's great. USB, typically the standard there is you plug it in. If it doesn't work, you unplug it, you uninstall the driver, you plug it back in, and you hope it works the second time. But I will say, if you're able to pair your phone to your car, or pair your phone to a set of Bluetooth speakers, that's Bluetooth in a nutshell. So you're right. We're seeing a lot more of that in industry and in education, where Bluetooth is becoming very common. USB has been around for a long time. So the nice thing about that, or I guess what I have kind of deduced from, since I'm 53, I can say this, younger generation than I am, my kids, they're technology dependent, but not necessarily technology savvy. So a way to advance yourself when you are looking for a job is to learn some of that technology. Learn the basics, being able to pair something, being able to connect, like I said, your TV to your DVR is an HDMI input. A lot of laptops now have an HDMI input. So get familiar with those types of things. Most positions that you have now, there's going to be some kind of technology component, and having to say, I can't do this, I got to wait for the tech guy to come down here and fix it. If you can take care of that real quick, and you know your own limitations, because then you'll irritate the technology guys if you show up and broke it, but know your limitations and be willing to try. I think that goes a long way, because that ability to learn, that ability to stretch your skills, a lot of hiring managers, that's one of the things they're looking for. Do I have to train this person on everything that we're going to do, or do they look like they have a good basis, and then I can build on top of that? So having a good, general technology feel I think is definitely something that helps folks when they're interviewing with the hiring manager.
Very good. Lee, anything to add to that?
I think Doug hit it pretty much on the nail of the head. I mean, today there's enough technology in the home and around you to where you can really start to yourself get some basics that can be applicable in the workforce. Like you said, your TV has connections, just figure out how it all goes together. Worst case scenario, you got to plug in the wrong port, just keep swapping, just kind of learn through, I mentioned that a little bit, I think it was last week about, not being so scared of breaking something. The chances of you breaking something to where it's unfixable, pretty low. Yeah, pretty small. Like I said, that being said, like Doug said, just understand that there are limitations, especially when you get to the workplace. There are things that, you do have to be careful of what you're messing with at that point. If you're diving into a software that does affect the rest of the system and accounts for people, there's limits to that you need to be careful with. But there's enough in your home to where you can at least get a basic understanding of how things connect and work together.
Lee, I thought the same thing. Just as Doug was speaking, I thought of what you said last week. Go ahead and try it, because he said, if you can go ahead and try, give it a shot. And I remembered you saying that last week. That was very helpful. In fact, Doug, you mentioned that people are tech dependent without being tech savvy. And some of those who are going to be watching that would probably say, yes, that's me. You just hit the nail on the head. And I think what you're saying is that really it's worth just a little bit of investment to understand what you already use, to understand what its basic function is, to understand what its parameters are, what it can do, what it can't do, and how you can use it, how you can, in an understanding way, utilize it versus how you can follow a few steps. You don't just read a WikiHow, but really actually take it as if it's something you can hold in your hands and make it work for you. You really are going to be the one to stand out, because in a room full of a dozen people, if the boss says, or the potential boss, the potential promoter, hey, I need somebody who can blank, and you say, well, I can do that, you just put yourself ahead of the rest, right? And probably upped your value to the company. Melissa, that's something we keep hearing about, is the value to your employer, right? Melissa, you spend all day in an office, and you're around people who are in offices, you're around students. Help this conversation, because you see a lot of this going on campus, and it's the same thing that goes on in workplaces, where I think in the vein that Lee's following, some people, because they've never considered themselves capable, probably have never considered how quickly they could double their impact by just a few pointers. But I bet you're around people who are kind of sheepish or uncertain, and maybe even afraid to try. What do you see as the big hangups in technology and software or hardware platforms or connections or any of these things?
Well, I think a lot of it is what they've hinted at is just go ahead and try some things, or in my case, what I'm always telling people, if you don't know, go Google it. Just had, before we started this session, a conversation with someone who's working on a project, and I'm like, look, I'm not even quite sure how to do XYZ in Excel. Go Google it. If you can figure it out, fix this for me. If you can't, we'll figure it out together. I know y'all are laughing at me, but seriously, go Google it. Go look it up on YouTube, because that's what I'm going to do to figure out how to do it. That, or I'm going to call Doug or Lee when I get really aggravated, but hopefully that's way down the road. But something that came to my mind as you all were chatting about the current generation, I was kind of thinking about some of us older people who maybe were not always exposed to some of the technology, or we acquired technology on the job. And I think for me, a lot of the stuff, when I was in college, we didn't have the internet as it looks today. I am younger than Doug. I'm going to point that out.
I didn't have the internet when I was in high school.
But there are certain things that many of us have acquired because we've been in the workforce so long. So we've just picked these things up. But I had a conversation not too long ago with someone off the campus, and they were looking at a job, and they said, it almost makes me laugh to say it, because they said, I never was a fast typer. And I'm like, nobody cares. Really, nobody cares. That's not a thing anymore. Nobody cares how fast you're typing. I mean, I'm sure there are some jobs out there, but it's rare. It's more about what platforms can you use, what programs can you use, certainly how you know, how you prioritize your work, but nobody's counting your words anymore. I don't think. So, you know, if you've been out of the workforce for some time, or maybe you're entering the workforce for the first time, we tend to think a lot about our high school students and our college students. But, you know, we have some parents or moms I know who wait until their kids have grown, and that's when they go into the workforce. Things have changed. So it's really important that you're not brushing up on skills, but probably acquiring some skills, like understanding that nobody probably is going to ask how fast you type. Um, but if you look at those job descriptions, a lot of times you can find out, is this a Mac company or is this a Microsoft company? Because they're going to put things in that job description that kind of throw those hints. And anytime you see something in the job description technically that you don't understand, Google it. Google it and see what you can find out. And there are so many free training platforms out there too. If you're like, I don't know how to use Microsoft Word, Google it. You can get some of those foundational skills and make sure that you're speaking the language of today and not the language of 1995. You know, we want to be sure that we're keeping ourselves current too. So I think that's an important thing. Reading those job descriptions, finding out some of those things. You know, talking about Bluetooth technology, or they're talking about Excel or Access, whatever. Look those things up and see what you can learn, because it may be that, yeah, you don't have the skills or the experience, but you can possibly walk in the door and say, you know what, I've never used Microsoft Access before. However, I have completed XYZ training that I found on Skills Tutor or whatever it may be. And so I'm familiar with it now. So, you know, there are things that you can do to prop yourself up.
I completely agree with that. And honestly, that's one thing that I can also say is I've probably learned more from YouTube and Google than anyone else would care to admit. I'm sure Doug's the same. I mean, because realistically, you're probably not going to have training on certain things, or you're not going to have in-class experience with something. But before this started, I was mentioning to Ron that I was recording some people because we're creating a video for an Employee of the Year thing that's coming up. Everything I learned about video and video editing has come from YouTube or Googling. So all of those skills came from that exactly. And like you said, there's tons of different platforms, and you're exactly right. If you look at a job description when it's posted, it usually says, you know, would like a proficiency in XYZ software. Everything that you want to know is somewhere on Google or YouTube. So absolutely use those, because they're, you know, have godsend when it comes to professional development. Like I said, you know, everything from server administration I've gotten from those platforms, to video editing, Photoshop I've learned from that. So all of that's out there. Use it. I mean, there's so much information for people out there.
Rich, very, very rich. Those are great contributions. You mentioned free training platforms. This is to any of you. Do you have particular ones that you recommend, whether it's free or even paid? Because we're talking about, potentially boosting your income by 4 or 5 digits if you do these things well. Do you know any right off the top of your head of some of the best training platforms that are free and or paid?
I'll jump in first and say that I used to, but because there's so much out there now, I don't tend to have one thing that I fall. This is me. They very well may know some go-tos. I Google everything until I find what looks reputable. And because there's so many resources now, you know, there are so many. So y'all correct me.
One that I've used frequently, but I think it is paid. We get it free through UGA, luckily, but LinkedIn Learning is a phenomenal one. And there's a lot of very technical things in there that are really useful.
And I would say, honestly, probably the vast majority of things, instead of Googling it, I go to YouTube. It's actually the second search provider. Our second largest used search engine on the web is YouTube. I'm a visual guy, so I like seeing the videos and watching, as opposed to having to read through all of it, which is a lot of times what you get out of Google. But like Lee, a lot of secondary skills that I have learned have come through watching a video or going to somebody's website. I have also used LinkedIn Learning, which used to be lynda.com. And they had some great products. And then if you've got some time and you don't want to pay the super premium, you know, there's plenty of tech sites and tech companies that will do training, and in a couple of weeks you can learn something. If you've got a little more time than that, honestly, a lot of the technical colleges have some great 12-week classes. They don't cost you near as much, and it's a slower pace. So you feel like for a lot of folks, it's easier to digest it in a smaller piece. I have gone through classes that, it's 4 days long, it's 12 hours a day. And when I got done, I felt like I was drinking from a fire hose, and I'm not exactly sure how much I retained from it. Whereas if it had been a 12-week class that met a couple times a week, I probably would have had it down better. But sometimes you've got time available, sometimes you've got money available, and sometimes you don't have either one. And like I said, YouTube and Google are both very good sources for trying to find somebody. And, with regards to Google and YouTube, I will state this because you can find a bunch of junk on the internet. Unlike the State Farm commercial, they can't post anything that's not true on the internet, right? You can find some garbage, but I will say the thing I like about YouTube, if it's had 1 million views and it's got a couple thousand thumbs ups versus a couple thousand thumbs down, it's probably pretty reliable, and it's something that you can use as a kind of an indicator that, yeah, this person who's giving me this information might know what they're talking about.
Fantastic. Melissa, I don't know if you caught this, and I'm so encouraged. I hope that everyone who's watching is going to be encouraged by this. We just heard 2 of UGA Griffin's top-notch experts tell us that they gained some of their, what I think we could call now, some of their, at least if it's not essential expertise, it's certainly regularly used expertise they gained on their own doing the very things we're talking about. And that is just going out to these search sites, to Google, to YouTube, and searching it, applying themselves, just doing exactly what we're talking about doing, saying there's a thing I don't know how to do. It'll be useful for me to know it. So I'm going to take the initiative and learn it myself. I'm taking me to school. I'm just going to find sort of a crowdsourced teacher or LinkedIn Learning, the old lynda.com, whatever it is. I hope that people are very encouraged that people today that are on these webinars are getting ahead in their jobs by doing the very things we're talking about doing. Don't you think that that's something that really could boost someone's hopefulness and say, it's worth me spending an hour, 2, 5, 10, 20 hours investing in some skills development? Don't you think?
I do. It's funny. I think we just rewrote the phrase, everything I needed to learn, I learned in kindergarten. I think we just rewrote it to everything I needed to learn, I learned from Google and YouTube. But it's true. There's so much out there. There's no, yeah, you can invest and go into certain classes. And as Doug said, I know for me, there are certain things I'm going to do better if I sit down and I watch somebody else show me and, physically right there. But there's so much out there that you can pick up. You can't sleep at 2 o'clock in the morning. Find a YouTube video on how to, Photoshop pictures or whatever. There's so much you can do. But I can't say enough too. We've talked about LinkedIn and we've talked about it previously too. I can't encourage people enough to join LinkedIn. You can do a free membership. You can do paid memberships too. But there's so much on LinkedIn when we're talking about these employability skills. There are employability workshops on LinkedIn. We use them a lot. We use them for UGA, but there's so much on there as far as training. But it's also a really good platform for looking for jobs. So if you're looking for jobs in an area or within a certain field, you can find those on there. You can get alerts for jobs when they come up. You can make connections to people in the fields in which you're wanting to enter. So I can't encourage people enough to check out LinkedIn. If you're not on LinkedIn, you need to join LinkedIn, even if it's just the free membership, so that you can take advantage of the resources there, including the that Lee and Doug were both talking about. That used to be lynda.com.
I'll
That's
say also with
Great.
LinkedIn. So I have a cousin that lives up near Nashville, and he's not actually going out and openly looking for jobs. Talk about the power of LinkedIn. He actually just changes his status to looking for a job, and recruiters are reaching out to him. So all the work's being done for him, and he doesn't really have to even go and apply for these places because people are coming after him. So LinkedIn is a powerful place for the job market.
Since you brought that up, and that's exactly what we're talking about here, could either of you speak, and if you can't, I'm putting you on the spot because I didn't realize I was going to ask this question. Can you talk about the difference between the free and paid and what would be the value of one over the other?
mean, I'll answer, and then just
Yeah.
from my point of view, my non-technical point of view, I believe that if you don't have the paid, there are some of the trainings you may not have access to. Again, I know that I do, but as a UGA employee, and so UGA is paid for that for us. So I know that's one of the benefits to having a paid membership. But do you guys know any of the other perks?
I'll say not off the top of my head because I haven't really dove into, but I think part of that is the training stuff, and I think it unlocks a couple of features. But like I said, the free is enough to get you started, and it's worth doing.
I've had the free for years, and it works perfectly. So.
We've spoken about a number of applications. We spoke about Microsoft Word, Excel, some of the basics that you're going to be asked if you're comfortable and familiar with these. And I think we're probably going to encourage people, don't say you are and then are not, because you're probably going to show yourself as something differently. Go ahead and spend a little bit of time, and it won't take you very long to operate intuitively. And again, I think we encourage people the same way. Try it. You won't break it. Just see what you can do and keep working. And so much of this is intuitive. And even if you don't get it the first time, that's fine. Just stay with it, because you're going to accumulate insight. So we talked about Microsoft Word and Excel. We talked about email. We talked, I think Doug mentioned G Suite and the move toward being acclimated to G Suite so that you can make that useful from the simple things, Google Docs and Google Sheets, moving into G Suite. We've also talked about LinkedIn. We talked about some hardware and being basically understanding the basics of how to operate a PC, how to operate a Mac, even including how to start one up, how to shut one down, how to navigate the menus, things like that, how to navigate the explorers, the file explorers, understand how the filing systems work. All those are things that you can either take a class on or just investigate, but you're going to need to be able to do it to get anywhere, and especially to stand out. You don't want to be behind the curve on these. Can we talk a little bit more about any kind of online platforms that you think are important in today's job searching environment? I don't mean necessarily employment applications, but maybe so. But anything that we need to know about some pretty important, pretty robust, or pretty helpful online platforms that we think, hey, you're going to get ahead if you really know how to use this or how to find this.
I think Doug kind of mentioned, like, as far as online, G Suite and Office 365 are both technically completely online. They're browser based. So I think those are the first ones to come to mind when we talk about robust online platforms. It's because G Suite and Office 365 both essentially, for all intents and purposes, do nearly the same thing, but they're just different companies going after each other. And all of that is web-based and easy to find. As far as specific softwares outside of that, the only other thing that I can think that comes to mind is things like Zoom, like this. That would be applicable pretty much anywhere.
Very good. Hey, let me follow up on that, because you said something, and we're moving past this pretty quickly, but I'm rewinding to some people I know personally who, if they heard me say, just make sure you know Office 365, they would scratch their heads and wonder, okay, what did you mean by that? Can you rewind and talk about what Office 365 is versus, we already said Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel. Can you talk about that distinction a bit? Either
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So Office 365 is essentially Google G Suite's direct competitor. So when we all think Google and Gmail, that's the mail platform. But along with that email account with Gmail, you also have a Google Drive account, which is basically online storage. You can store files there and all that. Next to that, you have Google Calendar. It's an online calendaring system that's attached to all your accounts. So all this is linked together. There's other things like forms where you can create forms. And I think Google Sheets is basically Excel in a browser. Microsoft has the same system. It's called Office 365. Outlook is their email. Excel, Word that we all know is also online, just completely browser-based, so everything is done in your browser instead of a specific software on your computer. So basically, things that you already use on your computer, but put into a browser window.
So what you're talking about is we're talking about a word processor, a spreadsheet, an email client. These are things that people can have, and they use them online. And so then the documents can be stored online. They can access them from any computer, even digital devices. Am I correct?
Right. So
Yeah.
when we say the cloud, as everybody says, all of your files and everything are stored at Google. They're not actually stored on your personal computer. They're all online. So that means technically you can access them from anywhere. So once you do it on your computer, you realistically can go and do the same thing from your phone. You can go to your friend's computer. As long as you're logging into your account, everything is available anywhere.
So if I know how to use Microsoft Word, whether I'm using Microsoft Word on my computer or I'm using this crazy, phenomenal 21st century thing, which is hard for me to sometimes believe that's where we've been for quite a while, because I was a Jetsons kid. So these things are, if I can use Microsoft Word on my computer, or I can use Microsoft Office 365, that's the same Microsoft Word. It just lives in a different place and stores in a different place. But if I know that, then I'm probably more capable even than I realize, because now I'm savvy locally or in the cloud. I can operate in either sphere. Is that right?
Right. So I think the main thing to keep in mind, though, is that with a lot of these, whether it's Excel or Word, you don't necessarily have all of the features that you would on the actual desktop version. Most of anything that anybody would use is there, but there are limitations to it. So, and it would require you to get somewhat in depth for you to run up against that wall.
So that's probably for most of us, and for most of the folks that are watching here, that's not going to be the issue, right? Any kind of entry level or basic functions I can do in any of them. And what I really want those joining us to know is that you already know more than you think you know, probably, because if you can use Microsoft Word, you can use any of these Microsoft Words. If you can use Microsoft Excel, you can use any of these. And the most basic things are easy to do no matter which platform. Is that safe to say?
I would go one step further. If you know how to use Word, you could probably get around in Google Docs. And if you know Excel, you can probably get around in Google Suites or Google Sheets. So that's the nice thing about that. There are some other free Office products, such as LibreOffice, Apache Office, and they're free word processing and spreadsheet packages that are built by other companies. They do it at no cost. And if you can get around in that, you're fairly intuitive, you can get around in Word, you can get around in Docs. That's one nice thing, is you learn the basics of one, you probably have the basics for most of those. And so unless you're going in for a position that is a lot of Excel computation where you're having to build formulas and spreadsheets that are linked together, that's kind of hard to fake it. But simple data entry and creating that, and like I said, where you were talking about whether it's a local version on your desktop operating system or if it's being stored in the cloud, then a good portion of that. The one thing I would like to point out, we did talk about this earlier in security, and it's not necessarily with getting a job, but it's just smart when you're on the internet. Don't use the same email and password for every account that you got. I see data breaches every day where the bad guys will break into one system. So if you're, wildboy777@gmail.com got hacked and you use the same password for every account, just because company ABC got hacked doesn't mean that they're not going to go to your bank and use the same information to try and log in. And if you use the same stuff, your bank account may be empty. So I would suggest you look at a password manager for letting it generate different passwords for each one of your accounts. Dashlane is a free one that works pretty well. OnePass is another one that works well. I personally use one called LastPass. Theirs is a pay-for version, but I do highly recommend that for folks, because if your password is password123 for every account that you've got, somebody's going to figure it out and start running around the internet taking all your stuff.
Half our audience just panicked. No, I didn't say. But you're saying it's a simple matter. All I need to do is just sign up to one of these. I can create it myself, but I can go to one of these systems, these sources, and you mentioned OnePass, LastPass, Dashlane. I can go to any of these, and they're going to create passwords. They're going to handle all that password stuff for me, right?
Correct. And then you've signed into that one account, and for example, I have an app on my phone. I can use my thumbprint to log into it, and then I can go look at that password. So even if I'm at a computer that I don't normally log into, and I need to get into my, say, my Office 365 account, and it's not the same password that I use for even my email account. I might use a slightly different password. I can look at it on my phone, so I always have those passwords with me. But if it's a device that you use on a regular basis, there's a little app that'll install on the computer, and when you go to that site, it'll automatically go, oh, I know this information. Once you prove to me you're who you're supposed to be, it'll put it in there for you. So it doesn't matter if you've got a 24 character, letters, lowercase numbers, special symbols, it puts all those in there for you, because I will say that can be kind of cumbersome if you decide you want to hand type every one of those in every time. So
fantastic. Melissa, I can't believe the only question that I am left with is, who is Wild Boy 777? Because that one's come up. So is that you? I just keep wondering, okay, have they told a story? Who's Wild Boy 777?
Heard of Wild Boy 7 since I've been here. I have no idea. I think they do.
Simply plead the fifth.
It's right. Sounds like Wild Boy just admitted. So that's the meme that's going around the UGA Griffin campus. Melissa, this has been so gripping the entire time. What have we not pulled from these two wizards that we need to make sure we get before we finish today?
The only thing I thought about that I wonder if we want to talk about at all, I know we're running out of time, is, we're talking about technology and we've talked about just about everything. The only two things I could think of is we talked a little bit about LinkedIn, but social media. You need to be aware of social media. Most organizations, most places of employment are going to utilize it. If they're not, hopefully you can help them to start utilizing it. But social media is a big piece. And I just have to throw this in there too, because I've had this experience as well. The telephone, just your basic telephone, like making phone calls, some experience with some people who are just entering the workforce. In my children, I have some children that are just now going to the workforce. They didn't use the telephone very much. They've texted, emailed, and online platforms, but you still want to have basic what's the word I'm looking for?
Etiquette. They mentioned email etiquette, and I think the same thing is true of phone etiquette. Yes.
Yeah, you want to have that basic etiquette, whether it's you responding to emails, responding to texts, answering. That's still a very important thing, especially when you still got some Gen Xers, we're still here. So, we're expecting hellos and goodbyes. So keep that in mind.
So let me throw one thing in on the social media, because this is something that a lot of people do not realize, but most hiring managers nowadays, they will ask for your email address, and then they'll go put it into those different social media platforms. And if you have not locked down the privacy, they may see what you don't want them to see. And I've done that before with folks that I knew I did not have a connection with. I thought, let's just see how much I can see about that individual. And in a lot of cases, it's wide open. And again, that's one of those things that might prevent you from getting a job, and you had no clue. You may never know, because they're not going to probably call you and go, yeah, we saw what you put on social media, and we don't agree with that. But you got to be careful what you do put on there. And in some cases, your public facing side, you might want to lock it down a little bit, so that people and your friends can see what you're posting, but the general public, you might need to scale it back just a little bit. You're not trying to hide anything, but like I said, you don't want to rule yourself out of a position accidentally because of something you wrote. I had a meeting earlier today, and somebody made the comment that we only make a certain number of good decisions per day. So make sure that bad decision you made at 1 o'clock in the morning doesn't keep you from getting a job sometime later on down the road. Because of some random post on social media. That's one thing that I would recommend is if you create that professional email address, then go out to your social media accounts and see what you can see on your good email address, not log it, the one you use for all your social media, without logging into that account. And if there's anything there that somebody would go, that might not be there, you might want to look at locking down your privacy just a little bit. Don't lock it down all the way, because they can't say anything. They're thinking at the same time, I don't see anything on this person. I got to wonder just what they're doing if they've got an account, but I can't see anything on it. So,
But you know, Doug, we have a solution today for when you're up at 1 o'clock in the morning, you're not posting on social media, you're on LinkedIn doing these trainings.
But they learned that today. So last week, at 1 o'clock in the morning, they were posting stuff they should have posted. So going forward, we got that taken care of. Yeah.
We're going to want to do that in session 1. Wild Boy 777. Go ahead and get Nice Boy 01 for your Gmail and clear things out. That's phenomenal. What great insight. And so we've talked about so many things. We talked about email etiquette and the ability to use an email client or use an email service, including, it occurred to me, things even like carbon copies and knowing how to having a signature, doing things like this, knowing how to use your hardware, whether it's Mac or PC, and be ready for know the difference between a command on Mac and a control on PC. These simple things. Don't let don't let terminology make you think you don't know something, because you probably do, or you probably are only inches away from competency. Don't be intimidated by technology. Don't be intimidated by language or the whatever the words that are used to describe the technology. Don't let any of that lingo make you feel like you can't do it. You can work a computer, you can work a phone, you can do Word, you can do Excel, you can do G Suite, you can do all of these things. It's just going to take a little bit of investment. Melissa, I think we have had just the most fascinating conversation today with both Lee and Doug, and I think that they have just hit a home run. What do you think?
I do, and I'm so grateful. And not one time did they tell everybody the solution was to restart your computer. That's only for me.
They saved that for you.
IT guys, is that because I noticed those quotes early on about being IT
Right.
guys. I was wondering about that, Lee. I don't know if you caught that or not.
I saw that.
Fantastic. Well, to all of you who are with us today, we're so grateful to share this time with you. We're grateful to our guests. Of course, Lee and Doug, thank you for making this such a rich time, for giving us so much expertise. We were taking everything in like sponges, and you made it an absolutely worthwhile time. Melissa, thank you for once again making this a gripping experience and making it something that's going to be worthwhile for us to hold on to and keep referencing back. And by the way, let me go ahead and tell you this: if you want to see a replay, this is going to be on YouTube. And so Lee has made sure we're able to go back and look at this again. If it blew by you, or there's some pieces that you're going to want to go back and recap, Lee, I'm right, this is going to be up on YouTube very soon, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
It'll be on the UGA Griffin YouTube page.
Fantastic. So you can find it there. And to all of you who are with us, we're grateful. Next week is the last week. We're going to be talking about professionalism. I think it's the one that's going to sew up the entire package. I can't wait. Melissa, next week is going to be our finale, and it's going to be worth every moment, right?
We have at least one HR professional who's been in the field for a very long time who is excited to be a part of next week's show. In fact, she sought us out when another guest mentioned to her what we were doing, and she said, I want to do that one. I'm like,
fabulous. Well, it's going to be the one, and it's going to sew it up nicely. So we welcome you back here next week. You can go to the same link that you used today to sign up. This is the last session. It's on Eventbrite. And for Truett's Grill, I'm Ron Brooks. I'm so grateful you joined us. And Melissa Gordon is with UGA, as are Lee and Doug. Thank you so much for being with us. And we look forward to seeing you a week from today at 4 o'clock.